Hi everyone, I'm Michael Mueller. I'm the head of acting and stage combat in the theater arts department.
Good morning. My name is Clutch Stanaway. I teach in the sculpture area and currently the department chair for the art department.
Hi there, I'm Kristen Mihailovich and I teach art history and I'm also the distance ed division rep for fine arts.
Thank you, Sudabeh. I am John Tibet. I'm Dean of Fine Arts, and I'm just so excited that you're doing this with us today. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So a lot of colleges are talking about reopening next semester. I know, Professor Mueller, when we had this discussion, you seemed very optimistic about the future of distance learning and like hybrid models and like having students choose. And Professor Tibet, I remember you, I kind of had the opposite feeling. Like if we do have to continue with distance learning, that would not be very good for our students. We would not be doing them justice. Can you just continue talking about that?
Sure. Are you just opening that up to anyone?
I am opening it up to anyone, yes.
I'm willing to start, but I have to say that we actually haven't discussed this among ourselves yet, so we all may have slightly different opinions.
Oh yeah, no, that's great. That's amazing. That's the purpose of this forum.
Okay, so I think actually both models will continue. I think that online learning will continue, has been and will continue to be an important aspect of what we do going forward in the future. But I think there's also a extraordinary need for face-to-face learning. I think that it's impactful in different ways. And I think we will see students wanting to return to the classroom. I think we'll see them looking for that social interaction among their peers, but also a real-time conversation with their professors that is just not the same as a Zoom where we're staring at each other's head and shoulders and there's not body language and movement. You know, for example, when I'm in the classroom and I have a discussion, I sometimes have them get up and take a position in the room. And then those positions can change. They can move around the classroom. And I think those kinds of conversations that we can have face-to-face are not replicated in the same way online. They're just different. They're just two different models. I think online learning is important because students who previously took night classes, working parents, for example, who are returning to school, lots of people who have many things going on in their lives will continue to want asynchronous online learning. But I think that online does not replicate what happens in the classroom. So I advocate for both. I think they're both going to be key components of what we do going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would just really agree with that, what Kristen just said. And I think that it does depend on the specific classes, especially in, well, in fine arts, you've got activity classes and you've got classes that require some kind of performance element. And like Kristen says, those situations are very, very difficult to replicate in an online or Zoom fashion. And so I too agree that we have learned some wonderful things through distance learning through this period of time that I think will never go away, and they will definitely enhance our teaching. But there are situations that if we cannot get back to face-to-face, we will see further detriment to our programs in the arts.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask Professor Stanaway, I know you specifically deal with sculpting, is that correct?
Yes.
So I want to hear your take on this because I understand that's a very hands-on subject.
I don't know if sculpture would be the right subject. Fine arts has been allowed 2 classes to be face-to-face since last fall. The other one is a theater tech class where they're building sets with Kevin Klaus. And then I'm teaching a casting metal class where the students are sculpting in wax. Socially distanced with masks, and now we have to, the students need to get a ribbon to confirm that they can be on campus. But even with the 6 feet distance, I've been pretty lucky, but it does pose its own challenges even face-to-face with 6 feet distance, trying to teach someone how to sculpt a skull in wax that's this big from 6 feet apart. So it's been interesting, but totally rewarding. And I'm very grateful to be able to teach face-to-face. Long-term, there's no way I think we could survive a cast metal sculpture class teaching remotely. So we have adapted with other classes. It's feasible if we have to teach life sculpture remotely. It's not ideal, but we've figured out some ways to do that. Same with stained glass. That's feasible. Whether it's the most effective way, I don't think so. 3D design is a composition class where they're building and fabricating with materials. That one I've been teaching remotely, and it's not ideal, but we have maintained and we've been able to create some pretty interesting objects. But what's lacking is the experience. You build something and then to have it in front of you with your peers to talk about it, to analyze it, to hold it, to feel the materials. That's the part that's lacking. It's been hard to do remotely.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. All right. So I really appreciate your responses. I think yeah, with regards to opening up, I think for fine arts, I think it's great that there have been 2 fine arts classes that have been able to meet up in person, and I'm glad that you were able to do that. So with that being said, for everyone, what are your goals for the next semester? Fullerton College is going to be in the process of opening up, and some classes are gonna.
I would like to start out by saying, yes, in the fall, we are heading towards trying to open. Our administration has made that clear to all of us on the Dean's Council, and so that we are right now putting together the fall schedule as a face-to-face schedule. With that in mind, we are encouraging everyone to maintain effective distance education and online classes that have worked well. And we see value in all of them. And so we don't want to just discard that, because we can now go back face to face, so that we give all students the option, because even if we feel it's safe, that students might not feel safe, and we're not going to demand or command anybody to come back into a situation where they do not feel safe. And that goes for faculty also. No faculty will be required to teach face-to-face. Even if we all decide that we can come back safely, we're going to leave that up to the individual and make allowances for that for the teachers and the students. So that's a really good thing, and I think that's appropriate. As far as if I feel we're safe, I think that's a very, very difficult question to ask, because even in the heart of the science of what's going on, we have so many different opinions about where we're headed and what is safe and what isn't safe and what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed. And across the nation, state to state, it differs. So I think our administration and our campus is committed to doing what we feel is the best for our situation and for our safety. And so we're working hard to come up with those guidelines, and I feel really good about that. I think there will be certain situations where even if the state comes back and says it is still not okay to open up, I think the campus is going to consider what they can do within these safe guidelines, because if you look at it right now, the state has said, stay at home, lock down, do not be face-to-face. Yet we have a few on campus in science and in fine arts and in tech ed and in PE that are still meeting face-to-face. And they have been completely safe. There have been no outbreaks. And they have really, really good checking stations and things like that for students to check in with before you even come to class, that have been very, very effective. So with that as a model, as we go forward, even if the state says, no, we changed our mind, we don't want you to meet face-to-face, we as a campus are going to say, well, what does that mean for us to continue to make choices that are safe and are in the students' best interests? So that's kind of where we're headed with some of those questions that you had.
Mhm.
I'll sort of, I guess, add to that. You know, I think we know so much more than we did a year ago when we closed down. You know, we didn't have masks at that point. We didn't understand so much of what was going on. And I think if we think about a reopening in the fall, we know how to play it safe. You know, we know about social distancing, we know about wearing masks, we know what the rules of the game are. And I think that we can do that safely for faculty and students if everyone's willing to play by the rules. It's sort of like driving, right? It's a risky thing that we do every day, but if everyone sticks to this set of rules that we've set out, then we drive safely. I think it's similar to that. And, you know, the other thing that I think is so important about and I don't want to undermine this discussion because I think online learning is so important, but it's also highlighted for me how different face-to-face learning is. And it's so impactful and inspiring. You know, the arts are so much about a passion. We love what we do, and we can share that passion so much more in a face-to-face environment than I think we can online. And although I was excited about so many of the things we've done online, and I've loved having this time to I think, enhance my courses online, I'm also seeing with my students and feeling myself, I think too, a kind of Zoom fatigue, right? That we're all, you know, we weren't meant to live alone in boxes and just see each other's heads, right? We're meant to interact. We are whatever, pack animals, I suppose. So
Human.
yeah, we're human. So I think that knowing what we know today, imagining that a greater number of us will be vaccinated by fall, I am hopeful that we're looking at a reopening that will make everyone feel comfortable and safe going back to campus. I hope I didn't undermine John in any way. Right? Okay, good.
I agree with you 100%.
Okay.
So right now there are a few classes that are happening in person. And so next semester, there's gonna be a lot more. What dangers do you think are gonna be presented with that? Do you have faith that the college and the students will be able to safely adhere to these standards given that there's gonna be like a much larger population of students on campus at the same time?
I guess I'll chime in since I haven't yet. I certainly do, based on the students that I've had at Fullerton College, and also working with you know, the administration as well as other faculty and you know, everyone involved in staff, and even just in terms of protocols that are being taken now. Fullerton College seems to be so proactive with regards to setting things in place, and you know, even just making sure that students are safe in the smaller classes that are happening now, that I think we're establishing a culture that is already, well, reestablishing, I guess, in a new normal, what has already been there, which is that everybody wants to have the best possible experience at Fullerton College in terms of the learning, in terms of the engagement with one another, and to be safe and to take care of one another, which is really great to have on campus. So I have every belief that, you know, reopening in the fall is going to go well, albeit with probably a number of hiccups and changes and modifications that need to be made. But I think that if anything, being in this online environment, it's taught everybody that we just need to be flexible and understanding, and having a variety of models as deemed to be being ready for hybrid, remote learning, things like that, is going to help everyone to succeed and to be able to manage with whatever challenges we face.
Yeah.
This is just sort of a side thought, but I think one of the like lasting learning aspects of this time is that not only as faculty have we become more adaptable, but I think this generation of learners will prove to be more adaptable, more flexible, probably more resilient as well. I think, you know, having to shift everything from face-to-face to online and then moving back to sort of a hybrid model or whatever happens, I think these students have shown us that they are resilient and they're adaptable, and that going back with some modifications to increase safety won't be a challenge for them.
Next question. What lessons are you going to bring into the next semester that you've learned from the last 2.5 semesters? I think Professor Mihailovich brought up a great point. You know, like we are learning that, you know, we have to be adaptable. What other lessons do you guys think that you're going to bring into the next semester?
I'll add something quickly. I've been surprised and so proud of the art department, and I'm sure music and theater are doing the same, but the art department now has a library, a database of demos, of recorded demos of processes, procedures, techniques, in all the arts. It could be drawing, painting, digital art. We have that database now that we can apply in the future. I mean, we're going to still be teaching face-to-face eventually, but having that as a resource for the students is going to be phenomenal.
I agree. And I think that's division wide. I think to a certain extent that's campus wide. That's something that we all are going to retain and value. I think one of the lessons learned for me, and I'm not in the classroom, I'm not faculty, but it's something that Kristen said that I think is so important. I think we're going to more greatly value community than we ever have before. The ability to be in proximity with other human beings, you know, inspiring them, receiving inspiration from them. It's the give and take. It's like Kristen said, we weren't meant to be in a box. We were meant to be in community. We were meant to run with the herd. You know, it's part of who we are. And I think we're all depleted of that in a difficult sense. And we're longing for that. And I think some of us, you know, that have been through this together, we will never take the opportunity to be face to face with someone for granted ever again. We're going to value that. We're going to cherish that. And I think we're going to utilize that in our teaching more than we ever have. And I'm excited for that new vision of community that we're going to bring into the classroom when the students return.
How have you seen your students respond to the pandemic, and how have you seen that being translated into the work they've been producing?
Clutch, do you want to talk about some of the art projects, maybe? Because they've been incredible, and I think they've like exceeded the expectations of what we thought was possible with studio art online.
That's true. I was holding back to let Michael talk. He's far more eloquent than I am. Yeah, but as Kristen said, I've been surprised. At the beginning of the semester, the Dean John Sudabeh asked us to collect images, performances, snippets to show the rest of the division all the student work, the best work of the last fall. When you compile it into 10 minutes of just student work, the best of the best, it's amazing what we did last fall, despite all of the hurdles and despite many faculty have never taught remotely before. Many people were even new to Zoom. So I mean, it's a collaborative effort between the faculty and the students. The students rose up to the challenge where they're working at home, on what surfaces they're working, on what technology they're using, but they were still able to produce some pretty amazing, stunning artworks.
Yeah, I'll second that too. The students, the collaboration between faculty and students, I think, has just risen exponentially. Because as faculty, we talk about the fact that obviously we don't have anything to do without the students. But the reality is that, you know, the educational process it's a collaboration. It's the students buying in. And I think now more than ever, we're so reliant as faculty upon the students being able to bring what they have to the room. Whereas before we might provide multiple resources for them that we can't offer in this space. So I think that the level of student engagement has certainly continued. And yes, there's the lag of figuring things out, but I know I personally have gotten many, many ideas from students. And just by simply putting the question on the table, this is what we did. This is the limitation that we have. How can we, what are some possible solutions? And so in a lot of ways, it becomes like what we're doing right now, a roundtable discussion of students bringing ideas, things that they may have experienced in another class, or things that they may have experienced just on their own through family and friends. And so by bringing those to the table, it enhances the learning for everybody involved. So I think more so than anything, I've really been inspired by the students' resilience to be able to pull the education out from this unfortunate circumstances.
Yeah, I really like what you said there. Like a lot of it usually, I think, okay, actually last year I talked to Professor Mihailovich, and I think he said that a lot of really great art has been produced in like really horrible, like desolate time. There's a lot of artwork that was created during the plague.
I don't know. Just one thought on that. I'm not sure I actually exactly would have said that. I think people always create art. I don't know that there would necessarily be more art because of struggles, but I definitely do think that art, both visual arts and performing arts, reflect the time in which they were created.
Yeah.
And I think many interesting things will come out of this time. And we're still in it, so it's difficult to process and kind of on. But I think in the coming years, there'll be some substantial artwork that reflects this time that we've spent in quarantine.
Now that like when we get back in person, there'll be times when I should just run out of the room and then come back and say that I had an internet issue and got kicked out, or that we can all just look at each other and just stare directly at each other for a little bit to feel uncomfortable. And then, just as a, hearkening back to that time when we were doing that. So I think that's great, and as John has mentioned before in meetings with us too, for as challenging of a time as it is, I mean, we do have in our title creative arts that we're saying that we are creatives. And so therefore it's inherent in our title that we, think outside the box, that we try and find new solutions to problems and things like that. So it's been really great to celebrate colleagues as well as the student work in terms of what they're able to do. Colleagues who hated technology, who, barely had an email, to then, diving in and saying, now I can do an online class. So I think, the amount of student success is huge, but the amount of, faculty success and, especially in terms of the learning process has been great as well. And I think, to harken back to what Kristen was saying, I don't think that these things are going to go away because we've taken time and we've found the value in things, but it's also garnered a greater appreciation for the things that just cannot be replicated.
So, Michael, I want to ask you, are you going to allow students who just don't want to be seen that day to hold up their headshot in front of their face during your lecture?
Right.
So they can
absolutely. They can bring a blanket and just, have like a blanket that they can put over themselves. They're like, I'm listening, but I'm not here. I'll have my audio on.
I really don't want you to see me today.
Right. Yeah.
On to the next question, unless anyone has anything else to add. Okay, so this one is for everyone. What are your goals for next semester? And I know that varies for like everyone. You're all in such different fields.
Are you talking about the summer or the fall or both?
Oh, fall.
Just want to make sure that we're talking
fall.
about.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Fall 2021.
I'm actually thinking really simple things like, my goals are really just to be with my students. Like I dream sort of about walking down the aisle, there's this side aisle, and I like descend that and go to the front of the room. And it's just like a thought that pops up of how nice it will be to interact with real people. I don't know, in terms of goals, I think, adapting to whatever the guidelines are, but getting students back to safe and effective face-to-face learning while at the same time still maintaining growth in our online courses. I think those would kind of be my goals. I want to see both continue to thrive because I think it meets student needs in different ways. And different students will gravitate to online learning than the face-to-face environment. But I really believe there's a strong drive that I'm seeing in my community, you know, with other parents and children that I know who, you know, like mental health issues are through the roof. These kids and our students need community. And so I really want to see them thrive in that environment. And I want to continue to encourage and see online learning grow and thrive.
I could add to that from a student standpoint, because my, excuse me, my daughter is taking classes at Fullerton College right now. She was actually in Kristen's class last semester, and this semester she's in another art teacher's, Deborah Davidson's basic drawing class. And her comments are, I can hardly wait till we're back face to face because I'm enjoying these teachers so much. I just want to be with them in the same room and know who they are, you know, because she's felt like she's gotten to know who they are, but it's not the same as face to face. So I think that would be a goal for students, is that they can make that connection deeper that they've already made really well through the distance learning. But and I guess make the connection deeper and make the connection more natural. It's back to what we were created to be. We were created to be with each other on this earth together as human beings, and we've been deprived of that. So that would be definitely a goal of many students.
Yeah, and going along with what John was saying, I know that, and I think we talked about this in our interview earlier, but making time for the students to have that interaction with each other, just because in this online environment, I forget, and didn't realize until recently that the students don't really have a space to pass each other in the halls or to be, you know, and hang out in the quad, you know, they don't have that social engagement. And so for new students trying to meet new students, they may have classes together, but they don't get a chance to really engage with one another because there isn't a forum to really do that effectively. And I know students are being resilient in terms of finding their own, but, and I'll just share this quick little story too, is that, you know, I got kicked out of internet, you know, for a class, and my students actually stayed in the class for over 2 hours after I had left because they just wanted to get to know each other and talk. But it was the absence of the teacher's presence that enabled that to happen, because otherwise there's this feeling of obligation. Well, I need to listen to the teacher or look to the teacher, or when the teacher ends class, then I should leave. And then we click a button and we're gone, right? There isn't that sort of outside of the classroom time. So you know, it just was a real wake up call to me that, you know, making time and space for the students, even upon return, that we all live busy lives, but sometimes making that extra little pocket of time where that students can have that interaction time, I think is important.
They were probably talking about you, Michael.
I'm sure they were. I'm just glad I don't have any of their social media accounts.
Yeah, I remember you told me that in our interview. I just think that's like so beautiful and like amazing that your students were able to connect like for 2 hours. That's crazy. That's like two separate classes. Like that's a lot. So yeah, that warms my heart. And also like what you said, Professor Sudabeh, Mr. Sudabeh, about your daughter like wanting to meet all her professors because she saw that there were such amazing people. That also warmed my heart. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Professor Stanaway, I was wondering, what are your goals for next semester, fall 2021?
I think this is on a lot of different, I think it's about a lot of different subjects, but just gratitude. I mean, the fact that the students, I get so excited to teach I love teaching and I'm very passionate about sculpture. They inspire me as much as I try to inspire them. And then my colleagues, I mean, I've been working with these folks for 10 years, pass them in the hall, hey, now it's different. I actually miss them. I miss those interactions. So just be grateful for, hopefully we get to see them all on campus in the fall.
All right, so I'm gonna move on to the next question. I wanted to ask about, of course, with community college, I feel there's like a greater emphasis on career pathways and like, well, at least that's from my perspective, that's how I felt. I don't know if maybe I'm wrong, but I felt that there's like a greater emphasis on like, okay, so like, how is this class going to lead to like job skills in the future? And I think as a journalism major, I know my art major friends feel the same way, but there's always like this pressure and from the outside world, always comments that we get like, oh, what are you going to do with your major in the future? Like people hounding us about like careers and like what we're going to do for our jobs. And I think especially now during the pandemic, that is a question that we get asked even more often and something that's an even greater focus on our minds. So with regards to careers, what new advice are you going to give students? What is something they should know given the times that we're living in?
I feel like John will have something wise to say here.
One of my plagues is that I usually always have something to say, and sometimes I need to be quiet. But I think advice that I would give to not only students, but faculty and just to people is we need to pause and take inventory of what is important in this life. And I think it's so easy for us to get very busy. And it's not a criticism, but sometimes we get distracted and we forget the things that make life really good. And I think this pandemic has caused us to have a lot of time to think, what makes life good? What are we missing? What do we wish we still had? And if we ever have it again, you know, I guess my advice to people would say, don't take anything for granted, and pause enough each day. Just have a moment to self-reflect and reflect on your surroundings and say, what is really important here? Because there are many things in the educational system that will demand our attention. But to me, there are fewer things that are really valuable and that are really important. And so that would be my advice, that as we jump back into it, let's jump back in as people who are changed for the better and move forward that way because of the things that we have learned and the things that we have understood and valued. And see how that changes the way that we learn, the way that we teach, the way that we live life.
So I actually think about this a lot. You know, I think I actually have a video that sort of addresses this. And one of the things I point out to students is that our students who are, you know, 18 to 22 are going to work for the next 40 or 50 years. They're not necessarily going to have one career. So I think one of the benefits of the arts is that it teaches observation. It teaches critical thinking. It teaches problem solving. And these are life skills that will go with you in whatever career path you choose. And I kind of, you know, I have so many art history students and I don't necessarily envision them all becoming me or being art historians or, you know, working in museums. I see them going into many different disciplines, but taking the visual literacy that they gain through my class into that profession, whether it's like law enforcement and it's, you know, the skill of observation, or you know, critical thinking, or they'll go to work in marketing or advertising. I think there are many, many things that the arts help to enrich people with. And that, when you think about the length of a career that you've got ahead, you're not necessarily going to just do one thing. Even if you're majoring in journalism and you aspire to be a newspaper journalist, if that even exists anymore, I don't know. But, that will change, that will transition over the next 40 or 50 years. So I think what the arts build is a foundation that makes students problem solvers, thinkers, adaptable, and it teaches them to grow in whatever pathway they ultimately choose.
Yeah.
So to me, that process then, Kristen, of what you're saying is our students need to learn to apply what they have learned in all walks of life, and to value everything that they have learned. I know my 4 children, who are all in their 20s now, constantly growing up said, why do I have to take this math class? I'm never going to use this. And I said, because beyond learning math right now, you're learning how to learn. And I know that just the few times that I've had the privilege of sitting in, Kristen, on your lectures, I am becoming more visually literate because I'm taught how to observe, like you said, in law enforcement or anything. How do we learn how to, understand what's going on around us if we don't learn how to observe? So I think it's wonderful advice, Kristen, to what you've said, to say our students need to take what they have learned and apply it for the rest of their life.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. And I think there's also a little bit of passion, the music, theater, art, it's passion. It's something you'll take with you into life, regardless of what you choose to become. I mean, I have this video where it's called Why Art History. It's like basically, why should you take this class? Essentially, if you're a business major, why does this matter? And one of the stories I tell, and I guess probably Clutch and John have heard me tell this before, is about a woman who I just happened to meet one day when I was watching my kids at a skate park. And we got to talking, and it turns out she's a doctor at USC, and she teaches there as well. And then I told her that I, teach art history, and she was like, oh, I love art history, which is what so many people say, right? Because it was fun and it was like wonderful, but they never did anything. They didn't take it down a career path necessarily. And she told me the story that people often, so she actually had majored in art history as an undergrad and then went on to become a medical doctor. So she went on to medical school. And she said, people always say to her, oh, that art history must have been really useless for you. And she says, no, actually, it was one of the what's really what makes her a great doctor, because it's all about observation. And in the case of like medical professionals, it's a case of, those observations can mean the difference between life or death, or a correct diagnosis and an incorrect one. So she also told me this wonderful story where she takes her USC medical students to the Norton Simon Museum in Pasadena, has them stand with their backs to a work of art and describe it in as much detail as they can to the people in front of them. So let's see, no, I guess it's the reverse. So the people that are looking at it describe it to someone who has their back to the work. And then when that person finally turns around, they're often surprised, like, oh no, that's actually not what I pictured. And the point of that exercise is that your descriptive language, so art history is also about writing, and writing explicitly and clearly, is essential. You need, doctors and nurses are shift workers. So you need to have that documented. You need to describe in great detail what your patient looks like at noon, so that the doctor who comes on at 6 p.m. can know if there's a significant change, or, if this is like a gradual progression. And so it's actually essential to, I used to joke that like, I'm teaching art history, it's not a case of life and death. And it's not, if I don't teach the Rococo, no one's going to die. But I think actually she made such an interesting, profound point in that these USC medical students are using art as a way of making themselves into better medical professionals. And I share that story with students, and they love it too, because they're like, oh wow, I'd never thought of that. And to be honest, I hadn't thought of it until that day at the skate park when she told me. So anyway, that's my little vignette.
That's wonderful. I love hearing that every time.
Final question for you guys. All right. So just this general question. What are you guys doing in your classes right now? What have you been doing for the past 2.5 semesters? Just the things that have helped the most, things during this time of virtual learning. And that's for everyone.
I guess the one thing that has helped the most has been to try to commune with my students in the space. And with that, I mean, um, not trying to hide behind professionalism in a sense. So my kids will come running in and, it's, watching me do a warm-up exercise is sort of like those videos of people trying to do yoga with their pets, so it's the same thing, and that it sort of helps those students who might be in similar situations. I mean, I teach acting at 8 a.m., and so, and having those conversations where it's like, if you can't do a vocal warm-up at 8 a.m. in the space, I get it, because maybe you have people sleeping, and things like that. And so, how do we make those modifications? And that placing ourselves, there are days where I'll ask the students to say, like, find the most awkward place to then record from today, or to, sort of be from, and we'll see who's the winner, in terms of, because we're all in these weird places and spaces, and then, but sometimes, as it sounds like, with Clutch and Kristen too, and John talking about the idea that it's through those limitations that all of a sudden immense creativity comes out, and then certain projects, certain things that students wouldn't have thought about before come into play. So I guess it's trying to find ways to be able to not shy away from our reality, but also lean into it a little bit and say, what are some possibilities that we can use off of it? And being flexible, so that students that, have that day where they're like, construction is happening, so I need to stay muted and I'll use the chat to communicate and things like that. Or I have to watch my, my youngest sibling right now, and so they're taking my focus. I'm going to do my best, but I'm listening in, so I suppose flexibility, as well as, trying to encourage students to lean into the creativity in small ways.
I'm so glad Michael said those things. That's really what I was thinking. Like, flexibility has been a big one. And I think, like, being human, realizing that, hey, we're in this too. We're not really happy in our little home bubble either. And we get interrupted by our kids and our pets. And, I guess in the classroom, they don't see our personal side as much because we're in more professional mode. But I think it's been very kind of humanizing. Like, yeah, you're in my home office with me, and my dog barks and my kids interrupt. Like, it happens, and they laugh, and we carry on. But I think it also makes them feel more comfortable. So maybe that's also a positive that's come out of this. We've all sort of, like, realized that we're in it together, and it's very humanizing.
It's very important to me to connect with students, and I've split up my class. We meet Monday and Wednesdays, and it's a studio class, so it's a 3-hour block. So on Mondays, we'll meet as an entire group and go over concepts and a lecture and group discussion. But the best part for me is on Wednesdays, I've broken it up into small groups. So then in a group of 4 to 5 students, then we can actually have better dialogue. I can connect with them as individuals, and I've found that really, really interesting. I would, if I have to teach remotely in the future, I'd continue that.
Michael, I'm curious, out of the awkward places that your students chose to be in, besides the bathroom, what were some of the other places that they chose?
I mean, some have been in, like, a kitchen cupboard cabinet type of thing, like one of those long cabinets. Others have found, like, a pet carrier, a large pet carrier, and so it's one person was in a crib at one point, and you're just like, okay, but I think it also helps them, because then, and I do encourage my students also on specific projects to say, how can you incorporate your family or your roommates or the people around you, so that they're part of your process rather than you trying to shut them out, because they're going to be part of your process anyway. So you might as well just embrace it and bring them in. So, and, pets, animals, things like that, people will be like, oh, this is, and so then they try to do a monologue, but they'll do the monologue to their dog, or, and they'll try and get their dog to sit and then, have the monologue to the dog, and things like that, where you're like, I mean, I don't know, saying it out loud makes it sound crazy, but yeah, but I think to Kristen's point and to Clutch too, this idea of releasing the students from any sense of propriety that needs to be in place in order for learning to happen, and that there's any kind of judgment about, and this idea of like trying to keep our lives outside of whatever this little window is actually more distracting than it is if you just let them in, and then let them all be sort of a part of it, And so my kids, all of my students know my kids now, and they're always aware. And so half the time it's a matter of saying like, my students want to know where my kids are, and so that sort of is a beginning check-in moment and things like that. But it also seconds don't, as performers, we know the golden rule is don't act with kids and pets. So dogs, animals, things like that. And I show that regularly, that nobody can maintain any focus on me if any of them are around. So
yeah, that's wonderful. One of my favorite moments in Zoom meetings was in a Dean's Council meeting. There were about 20 of us, and that day, Dr. Orligen, the president of the Faculty Senate, was invited, and she was speaking. And while she was speaking, she was sitting in front of her desk, and her cat slowly walked in front of her, and the tail whipped her in the face, and then it walked off, and she didn't miss a beat, but she didn't hurry the cat. She just let it happen. That is by far my favorite moment in all of my Zoom meetings. And I immediately told her that in the chat. But Sudabeh, how do you want to wrap this up? Because I'm going to need to go, and I'm sure my colleagues are going to need to go too. How do you want to wrap this up? I thank you so much for this. It's just been excellent.
No, thank you guys. Thanks sincerely from the bottom of my heart. Like, you guys have been so amazing and like just so accommodating, and like just I was actually really afraid last night that like no one was gonna come, and so like I'm so happy to see you guys here, and like you guys, like the things that you have said have really inspired me and very like warmed my heart a lot and have made me appreciate the arts even more than I already have. So yeah, the way I want to wrap this up, does anyone have any last comments? Anything that they want to say that I haven't addressed in my questions? No?
I appreciate your hard work, and thank you so much for including us.
No
yes,
problem.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Really appreciate this.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm gonna let you guys go. I know you guys are probably very busy, but yeah, goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudabeh.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.